Okay, just so everyone knows, recording is on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Evening, Bob.
Sorry about that. Had a little problem with the old computer. So. How? Are there others on at the present time, or are we still waiting here?
Had 20 people on, Bob.
You got how many?
20.
Oh, good enough then. Sounds good. Okay. Good evening. As we stated in the past, we are doing this by Zoom for, unfortunately, the virus. At the last meeting, we discussed soliciting information feedback for the report's draft. And at this time, what I have done, and then I'd like to discuss this evening, is I wrote up what I considered the key points of the discussion so far that we've come up with. And some of these, they're my own, some other people provided. And I'd like to go through them and expand them, clarify them, answer questions, discuss them to see if in fact there's some agreement as to these are the key points. And if there are other ones, let's add them and get them on the slip. From there, we'll go from there. On the document, which I believe was sent to you this afternoon, apologize for that. The key points are mine that are in regular type. The stuff italics, that was actually given to me by working with Julie. She was kind enough to work with me to try to work this through. So she can take responsibility for the italic stuff. I will take the responsibility for the normal. So for instance, on the very first one, the Genesee County Sheriff's Department is an accredited agency, meets or exceeds all the state's requirements, and closely adheres to state policies and procedures. I think we heard that over and over again. I'm not sure if the 25 years is right, Sheriff. Is that correct?
2000, we became first accredited.
So it's 20 years. Okay. So correction right off the bat. But hopefully, I thought that's a very significant thing, a point that needs to be made, that this is just not this committee saying it or the Sheriff's Department. It's actually been reviewed by an outside agency, an accrediting agency. And there are very few of these accredited agencies in New York State. Is there anybody who would like to add, subtract, contradict, whatever on that particular point?
Bob, this is Matt. I would also add, probably worth noting that they were just recently reaccredited.
Good point.
Reaccredited in December.
Of 20.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Thank you. The next point we talked about, and this will come up again and again and again on the various benchmarks that the state put out there in this document, the whole issue of training. you heard the sheriff say and the undersheriff say continually, it basically is an ongoing process. And it's continually being upgraded as new situations develop. Obviously, the world changes, Genesee County changes, and the training therefore has to change. You can see there, Julie's comments. Should ask the group to discuss training. Thoughts on the training and what you heard from the sheriff, the undersheriff, and the other people who presented on the level of training they do and how it's done. So I appreciate.
I think we should note in there that the hot topics right now are de-escalation training, bias training. I had another one, I just slipped my mind.
I would say
Think
mental
there's-
health training.
What, I'm sorry, what was that? What somebody said?
This is Linda. I would say mental health training.
That was it.
Yep. I was going to say, along with the mental health training, emphasis on trauma-informed care and also vicarious trauma training as well, for the deputies, for the sheriffs, for anyone dealing with the public.
Yep. The trauma-informed care is definitely something that mental health can assist with. Very, very good point, Julie. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm certified in training with that too, so I would be more than happy to work with Linda and her agency on that.
Excellent.
Now, going back to de-escalation and the bias. When we talked about that earlier, if I was correct, Sheriff, because of the whole virus situation, it's been kind of on the back burner this year, but you can't really do too much.
Well, right now, the in-person training, just like everything else, like this meeting is, everything's virtual. There is no in-person training, or very limited. But I expect to see the state offer de-escalation training and bias training and so forth. I'm sure that the Municipal Police Training Council is in the works right now, putting some of those programs together. And again, those will be trainings that are probably going to be required. I'm not certain if they'll be on an annual basis or will be on a regular basis, similar to other like firearms training and so forth. And again, if you follow their policies and procedures, and again, that would be something that we would need to do to maintain accreditation.
Other issues on the training. Number 3, the agencies working very closely together here in the county. I find it sort of interesting because if I'm not mistaken, the state police and the other state agencies, such state police over in the state parks, et cetera, and so forth, are not required to do this. And to me, it's sort of interesting because of the close car concept. The issues we just talked about for training, they should be getting that training as well. And, where do they stand on, on that? So that is just my own, perception of that issue. Any comments, sir? Number 4 becomes really the big one. We just talked about it above. Julie, you want to comment on your comments?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. I was going to defer this probably more to Linda because she's the director for Genesee County Mental Health, and her input and should speak on how they can discuss various trauma-informed care training until or any type of mental health training for the officers until mental health professionals can show up, because I think that would be a great part of a de-escalation technique that they can use. And also we would need to have some type of input on how the sheriff's office can collaborate with not only Genesee County Mental Health, but also local agencies like JACASA, Western New York Independent Living, or ARC, that work with those individuals with the developmental disabilities, and also possibly working, just basically working with different or Office for the Aging as well. That's one group to work with that deals with the aging population. But Linda, I think if I can defer to you, if that's okay, that you can talk more about trauma-informed care training, vicarious trauma training, and de-escalation training as well, that your office can do. I don't know how much your office can do.
So I think, working with all of the police departments on this executive order, I do think we could probably do more collaborative trainings that might incorporate all the law enforcement agencies, instead of doing all the trainings independently of one another. I think that there would be great benefit from that. But in regards specifically to trauma-informed care, Julie, you and I can work together and figure something out about how to deliver the trauma-informed care training. I'm more than willing and able to do these trainings, but like I said, I'm doing them for all of the police departments. So I do think, we could collaborate, and it would be really helpful to develop a training and push it out, the same training that gets pushed out to all the law enforcement agencies, so that they're all getting the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you and I want to work on that collaboratively, I welcome that. Trauma-informed care, for those of you that really don't know what trauma-informed care is, and Julie, chime in, it's really taking into considerations a person's history, all their points in their life that really has led them to the moment maybe in crisis. Any kind of traumatic events that they've had, any kind of family history, any kind of addictions or abuse. It's looking at a broad picture of an individual and just being aware that people have had traumatic events, and that could potentially come out in unhealthy or negative ways. And then, the vicarious trauma really for officers is really what they see day to day.
Mm-hmm.
And how it impacts them. You may start out your law enforcement career in one way, and then as the years progress, the more you see in the world, the more traumatic events you experience, or the more violence or moments like that, it will start to potentially impact you, as an officer and as a person. So vicarious trauma is really a lot of self-awareness for yourself, but also for each other, and paying attention to that. So those special trainings, I think it would be really helpful if we developed a training curriculum that can get pushed out to everybody, because like I said, then everybody's getting the same thing. I'm working with all the police departments. And Julie, we can certainly look.
Okay. Yep,
Work on that
absolutely.
together.
I would be more than happy to add that, to help out with that. I think it's very important to have the trauma-informed care training, especially when you're going out to a situation, because how somebody reacts to law enforcement could be because of past trauma or some adverse childhood experiences that they might have had. So for example, if male officers, and I know that not all the time you can get a female officer, a male officer coming out to a situation where it's dealing with a female individual, she might have some past trauma in her past where she is resistant in dealing with a male officer. So, trying to recognize those things and those items, and possibly try to get a female mental health professional or a female officer out to the scene if that is a possibility, because I know sometimes you can't have that always happen.
Mhm.
So that would be an example of why we would need trauma-informed care training.
Mhm.
If there's
Comment?
any other input from any other individuals, that would be great on the mental health aspect as well.
Comments?
I'm all for it. I think it's definitely needed.
I would also have to add on to the mental health aspect as well. And a lot of people don't talk about this, especially in the Black and Brown communities. And some people can correct me if I'm wrong, but with my studies on this, there's a lot of distrust with the mental health community, with the mental health professionals amongst the Black and Brown communities because of historical racism, dealing with that. So also understanding that and learning about that will go a long way as well. It's something that I have taught in my trauma-informed care training.
Are there any other comments or?
I was just kind of gonna jump in on the matter of the woman who is having an interaction with law enforcement is a victim of a crime. I know that the expectation of having a female officer might be a really difficult one to fulfill. But I've worked with Restore, and I think I see Justina is on here as well. Restore Sexual Assault Services in the YW can be a really useful resource, especially if you have a situation where you have a victim, male or female, to be frank. But if you have a victim that is escalated and might be interacting with you on a matter that doesn't necessarily directly involve their victimization, but the benefit of a small community is, a lot of times people on the road have that awareness that this person has been involved in domestic violence or sexual violence situations in the past, and I don't want to commit programs that I'm not directly affiliated with anymore, but I can say that they're both really good organizations and they can lend a hand on a situation like that too.
Thank you. Others? Okay. Number 5, community outreach. This I have found very interesting. Over the past few weeks or plus, I have attempted to contact various people, minority community, and have had great success and had some very, very interesting discussions, and to get the other perspective. And the first thing I would like to do is the positive reaction I've gotten from them as far as the sheriff's department goes has been, quite honestly, overwhelming. They really feel that, well, they have been very comfortable with the sheriff's department and overall in Genesee County. One thing which one agency I didn't even know existed, it's not even an agency, although they're slowly setting up, is Justice Kings. They have been involved with our counterpart over at City Police Department in their review. And they were started last summer. I'm not sure of all the individuals who were involved. I was directed, because I happen to know the individual, to Otis Thomas, who went to school with my kids, and I believe right now he's actually coaching Matt Lander's daughter in sophomore up at Notre Dame. And he's doing some coaching over at Batavia High and so on and so forth. But I don't know, Sheriff, have you been involved, or have you got any contact from Justice Kings?
It's Just Kings, J-U-S-T,
Yes.
Oh, Jess, okay.
Just Kings.
Okay, I was driving down the road when we were talking. Just King, okay, apologize for, Sheriff, have you?
I've had limited actions with them or interactions with them, particularly with the rally this summer. We worked with them to a limited degree. I do know several members of Just Kings, though.
The talking with that particular group, again, talking with Otis, but I did talk with another member. But in any case, they would like to see some type of an effort that if we could combine and talk all the police agencies in the county would be kind of good. And anything they can do to get a closer relationship with the sheriff's department. Now, they found it's good. Again, the Black community is primarily in a couple of larger settings, such as, or for Genesee County, City of Batavia, Leroy, etc. However, the Brown community, particularly because of the migrant workers, etc., and so forth, is a much larger, and Hispanic workers that stay here year round, as well as the ones that come for the factories in Virgin and Oakfield. So they want to expand. I mean, they want to broaden their scope more than just the Black community. They feel that it needs to be a broader perspective. And again, I'm reiterating what he said, and I'm hoping I'm quoting him correctly.
Hey, Bob, if I can jump in real quick, one thing that is good to note is that there is going to be a representative on CJAC from the group Just Kings.
Oh, good.
So that
You know
was
who it's going to be?
Bill. You remember the name?
Greg.
Okay, Greg Monroe.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was there was a request that came through the city police chief for some representation on the CJAC. They'd heard about it. So the group met CJAC, as we meet every month, and there was some discussion, and there was a consensus that we need more input and more viewpoints. So we ended up creating an extra citizen member. And then from that point, the idea was that, the recommendation to the legislature for creating the position was that while it's labeled just another citizen member, the effort was to have more diversity and viewpoints on CJAC. And we have Greg Monroe, who is just recommended to be on, so he should be joining us at the next CJAC meeting.
Perez, I see you're on. Have you been involved at all or any contact with them?
No, I have not.
Okay. All right. So it is one area, and I'm glad to hear that on CJAC, because that for this particular organization, because they do come with some other ideas, and you can see what Julie added in our discussion there.
Just for purposes for the rest of the group that might not remember, CJAC is the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee. It's a meeting of, gosh, I think we're probably over 20, 25, 30 people now. And it is law enforcement represented from all the law enforcement agencies throughout Genesee County. It includes everything in the criminal justice realm related to probation. We have ICE has representation on there. We have the human service fields that deal with issues related to the criminal justice. So we have Teresa on here. So we have the CAC, we have Genesee Justice, we have mental health, we have the DSS, and the variety of judges and magistrates and justice courts and everything. So it's widely representing everything that you could think of that touches criminal justice. And whatever the topic of the day or the month or the year is related to criminal justice, this group kind of discusses it, whether it was issues with the jail, or it was bail reform, or it's discussing raise the age issues. So sometimes we have a meeting and it might go really short because, relatively speaking, there's nothing major going on, but there's been some very great discussions, heated discussions, in-depth discussions that, and it's just a great idea to have, 20 to 30 people engaged, leaders in the community in their areas of expertise coming together and discussing pertinent topics.
Just to follow up on that, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but when I was on the legislature, I served on that committee, I believe, for 6 years. And you always think of these things that the state mandates or something happens like that. But this was very organic. And when we were doing the jail project, which is still an ongoing project, but in any case, we had outside consultants as well as the architects, blah, blah, blah. They were so amazed to see that organization. I mean, they traveled the whole country doing these, consulting on jails, et cetera, and so forth, criminal justice and crime statistics and all that. That I think if they said it once, they said it many times, that it was a highly unique thing. And I'm sure they almost said that there was no place else we even had such a thing, such a ongoing group coming together. So it really is unique.
And just to add to that, at the last CJAC meeting, we discussed adding a discussion every month about the progress of this group and the one with the city and the village of Roy, just to see if there's anything that all of the people represented on the committee can do to support the effort, to communicate about the effort, make sure the community is aware. So that's going to be a monthly thing on CJAC as well.
I noticed that Julie did mention about women, the sheriff's office. That was,
Yep, I think we should involve maybe some women's groups like Glow Women Rise, who's very much in the community for the Glow region, and any other community organizations or groups that might be out there that the sheriff's office can engage with.
the other thing on this whole community outreach, the individuals that I talked with and the respect they have for the sheriff's department in particular, and the way they handle themselves. The one thing that they all pointed out is the approach to the citizen. And the example, the classic example is car goes through a stop sign. Okay, fine. Most of you probably never did that, never had the occurrence, but next thing you know, the little red light's on behind you and the guy comes up. Sheriff pulls in, walks up behind you. That should be as non-confrontational as possible. And B, that particularly when there are youth in the car, whether their father's driving, their mother's driving, or whatever, to make sure, because that becomes one of the first encounters those young people, those children have with the police agency. And that was the one point we're talking with them, and all of them, they stressed that the youth to them is very, very critical. And they've come to expect certain treatment, whether it's right or wrong is another issue, or should be expected, but they know how to do it. They've got the maturity. They know that, okay, but quite honestly, I've had teenagers, you've all had teenagers and young people. They react the less we can, have confrontational activities. That is really, and that type of training, that type of awareness by the officers. I think that was one thing I got loud and clear from the various Blacks and others that I had talked with in this process. So That's just another comment. I don't know if anybody wants to care to comment on the sheriff or the undersheriff or any, but. Okay. So on to recruitment. This I found sort of interesting because over the past few months, or excuse me, past few weeks, some of the preliminary data coming out of the review commissions has been published or at least discussed in the newspaper, so on and so forth. And I believe it was yesterday in the Buffalo paper, there was an article about Niagara County Sheriff's Department and their problem recruiting. And it quite honestly hit home to some of the issues we raised here. One of the individuals I was talking with, the whole weight thing is, you know, all that, the whole issue of recruitment, and we had quite an extensive discussion last meeting 2 weeks ago. So we wrote some things down there, and I apologize. The second part should be italics. That is Julie's comments. I guess I forgot to get them in italics, but anyways, so go from there. People's comments, criticisms.
I actually took a class, well, it was just basically a Zoom meeting with workforce development, the one that's at Aldi, in the Aldi's Plaza. So they are starting to do small classes. It's about 45 minutes about taking the civil service exam and what's the process in taking the civil service exam. And they gave a lot of resources and links to that. I think that is one of the low hanging fruits that you guys can work with the sheriff's office in getting out the exam schedule, getting out how to take a civil service exam. Also, in this meeting that I went to today, or the class that I went to today, they also showed links where we can do practice exams as well. So I think though that would be very beneficial for Genesee County Sheriff's Office to start putting out there, and also working with all the superintendents of the Genesee County, of all the Genesee County schools, along with the superintendent of Notre Dame, to start getting kids interested in a possible career in law enforcement, and teaching them the process and how to have a long-lasting career in law enforcement. And those were just my ideas to put out there. If anybody wants to chime in or add to those, I would be grateful to hear anything too, in case I missed anything.
Just to chime in, Julie, this is Matt. Teresa Van Son from Job Development also touched on, she sent an email over. I don't think it got out to the whole group. She sent it to Carolyn and myself. She was going to hopefully be on this, but she was unable to participate because she is double booked for tonight. But just to give our group an update, she did say that they have created a civil service how-to workshop. First one is scheduled for today at 2. The next one is February 16th at 2 p.m. People that want to contact the Career Center at 344-2042 to register. It's currently being held via Zoom, and the workshop highlights how to find and register for federal, state, and local civil service positions, and provides preparation and testing tips.
It was very good. I was the only one who did it today. Yeah, so it was very good. A lot of great resources.
A question on civil service exams. How often, for instance, is the sheriff's one for the police? How often is that offered?
Typically once every, up in the range 2 to 4 years, but usually it's 3 to 4 years. Depending on, like right now, help me out here, Brad. I think we got one coming up June or July, somewhere around there.
Yeah, we have one scheduled right now for May. with COVID, we usually receive several applicants. So the testing site's going to be a challenge. If we can't have it in May, we are looking at November. But again, it's, due to COVID and the amount of people you can have, it's going to be a challenge. We may be able to do it in different areas, maybe different days, but it's still going to be a work in progress.
Isn't that a computer test? Don't they do it on the computer?
No, it's a booklet, hand, fillable.
And again, the sheriff's office doesn't put that on. That's through human resources, and it's set by state civil service. So
Right, no, I realize that, but I thought it was a test that was on the computer like SAT and all these other tests are today.
No, they hold them.
So it's the old traditional test.
Typically a GCC, and like the undersheriff was saying, there's concern now of the number of people they have sign up and how to accommodate, if COVID, keeps on going here. But as soon as we get the date for the exam, we are, make sure we get that out and get it out to the minority communities and so forth, and broadcast it as much as we can.
But you said, how often is a test offered?
I think the list we're on right now was given back in 2017. 2017 or 18.
Now, is that because we didn't offer it or the state didn't offer it?
Well, what happens is if you get, say, 80 people on the list, that gives you a lot to choose from over the years. So they're not inclined to keep giving it here in Genesee County every year because you have a workable list. So typically minimally they go 2 years, maximum they'll go 4 years on the test.
So historically, Bill, the problem hasn't been getting people to take it. It's just getting a diversity of people taking the test. That's what the problem is. And now having potentially some greater interactions with an organization like Just Kings, I think they can help with getting the information out to other individuals.
Yeah. I don't recall offhand. Maybe Brad can help me again on this one. You know how many we had on the list, Brad?
I want to say it was over 100. And again, once they send out, once we get through the list and we send out the canvas letters again to solicit interest, we always don't get those back. So that's when the numbers start to decrease. We get into the second year of the exam, you start to see the numbers really decrease. Individuals have accepted other jobs, have decided not for, their goal is not law enforcement. So we do see a decrease in those numbers. But I think what you're going to see is as we improve our community outreach, I think you're going to see an increase in the number of individuals that do take the test. So the one positive thing is if we can improve, increase our community outreach, we're going to have that many more numbers.
Now, is that test for all the personnel in the sheriff's department, including the jail personnel and road patrol? I mean, the whole.
No, there's different tests. There's one for deputy sheriff. There's one for correction officer. There's one for dispatcher, and then of course any promotion, sergeant, investigator. Those are all testable. And when they run the test here in Genesee County, routinely it's run across the whole state. So if we run one in May, it's really not us running it, it's the state running it, and they will have probably most counties across the state will run it at the same time, and many times the PDs will do the same because it is the same test. And then what you can do is you can cross file. So you can take the Batavia PD test, Leroy Police, and the Genesee County Sheriff's. It's basically one test.
But with that test, let's assume the individual lived in Genesee County, but there's an opening over in Wyoming. Now I realize you'd have to move there, but could he apply for that and move over? I mean, the same test?
No.
Because he wouldn't be on their list?
Well, there's several factors that come into play. First, they got to look at what the requirements were to take the Wyoming County test. And if those requirements to take that test are more stringent than it is in Genesee County, then you can't even be considered. And from my understanding, in order to do a lateral transfer, you'd have to be hired here in Genesee County, go through your probationary period, and then you can ask for a lateral transfer. But in order to if you want to get hired in Genesee County, you got to use Genesee County's list. If you want to get hired in Wyoming, you got to use their list.
Okay.
I'm just curious. I have a quick question. I attend GCC. I just wanted to see, do you guys get a lot of test takers or like candidates from the college, or is it mostly people who do not attend the college? I don't know if you know, but I just wanted to see.
I can say in the past, we've hired many individuals that are graduates from Genesee Community College. I guess I would say that, now it's a mixture of high school and college that we get. But we have several individuals here that have completed the course out of GCC.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, this is Laura. One of the things that is just over and over and over again that has been, that we've talked about is just this antiquated civil service system. And I know that we talked about it several meetings, but again, it just floors me that this test is only offered. I mean, I feel as if it should be offered at least every year. And I just can't help but think about the number of people who are discouraged by the process, who would be otherwise be good candidates, but just don't want to wait for 3 or more years to put their futures on hold just to wait for that test to come up. And again, I know, I don't know what kind of control, obviously we know we don't have too much control over that system, but again, it just keeps coming back to that. If we want quality candidates, if we want diverse candidates, that system just has to be addressed. And it's discouraging.
Well, there is movement right now to try to.
Go on, Sheriff.
I thought Julie was there.
Oh.
There is movement by several organizations, including the New York State Sheriff's Association, to get some type of civil service reform. But the other thing you got to consider is that when they give this test, there is a expense to running that test, as far as getting the advertisements out, having proctors for the exam, and so forth. And human services, I mean, it's just not deputy sheriff's exam. It's most civil service exams are not given on a yearly basis.
Okay, talk to you later.
Usually it's a minimum of 2 years, and the max is 4 years. Otherwise, you're liable to have a test that comes out. If, let's say we run this one in May, you probably won't get your results until June, July, probably beginning of August. And then if it's only good for 1 year, that means that people got to retake the test in another year. So that can be discouraging also.
So it's okay. So it's not like a one and done thing. You have to keep taking the test.
Right. And, we found that, usually after about 2.5 years or so, we can call for a test. We can, but if there's a number of people on there, human services isn't so inclined to run another test when you've got, several people that you can still choose from.
This is Linda. I just want to comment on the civil service laws. It's not only just county government, it's state government that also has to follow civil service for all positions. So I know that we're talking about law enforcement, but it's, there's also civil service exams for, social workers or mental health workers or caseworkers or, financial people. And so there's civil service across the board. And there's laws that need to be followed. It is a little bit of an archaic system. And it does take a long time, but if you want to work for county government, if you want to work for state government, and you want to be a law enforcement official or a social worker or something, then you take the exam and you wait. I mean, I've done that several times. You take the exam, you work, you wait for your results, you get a canvas letter hopefully, and you proceed. But that's civil service law.
Other comments?
Yeah, Bob, this is Greg Post. It came to me during the last couple of weeks since our last discussion. And I had a couple questions about the connection between public administration, both in the sheriff's and other agencies, with the Veterans Administration. Is there a benefit for veterans making applications to these exams? Are veterans given additional credit towards these as they are in some others? And the reason I ask this is that it seems as though our armed forces are much more diverse than some of our local agencies, particularly in Genesee County. I think there's a wider representation. And I just wondered if there was an avenue there. And if we're reaching out to organizations to be a part of this conversation, should we consider including maybe Mr. Joyce or someone else who could send an advocate or have representation to increase the opportunity for candidates through that measure?
Greg, yes, veterans do get credit, extra credit. I forget how many points it can go up to, but they can use their credits for the initial test and also on the promotional test. And we have hired several veterans. Some choose to use their veterans credits upon hire. Some like to save them for their for the promotional exams. But there is extra points that are given for, and rightfully so, to the vets.
Now, if you had an MP, he would have to take the test.
Yes.
Other questions, comments, please?
And those veterans credits aren't just, that's civil service wide. Any test that you take, veterans get the ability to use veterans credits.
But for the purpose of this organization, for this, trying to get better results, should we be have an advocate or have some conversation or dialogue with Veterans Agency?
I'm not so certain we need to. We do have several vets that take the test, and like I said, I'm not sure. Where would you be looking to go with that?
I was just asking the question whether or not there was a need.
Okay. I don't think so, to be honest.
Okay, thank you.
Are we going to be able to start working with the legislators or lawmakers to start changing some of the archaic regulations or rules that they have for the civil service examination or the civil service process? Is there any way that we can start maybe doing that as well?
Hey, Bob, can I comment on that?
Yes, please.
After the last meeting, I'm a member of the New York State Association of Counties Public Safety Committee. I think I mentioned that at the last meeting. And I reached out to Sheriff Ron Spike from Yates County, I've known for almost 30 years. Who's currently the chair of the New York State Association of Counties Public Safety Committee. It's a very active committee. There's probably 20, 30 people on this committee. And I brought this to his attention, and he says this is a contemporary issue that is being addressed all across the state of New York, and that he is working on a resolution for our meeting, which is going to be on February 8th, to present to our committee in reference to the civil service situation being antiquated, and it's really a barrier to diversity in several areas. And I listened to the Batavia Police stakeholders meeting they had, and it's an issue with them. It's an issue with the Leroy Police. They're all going to put that in the report to the governor and to the legislators. And hopefully there'll be enough momentum going. I know somebody mentioned the New York City Conference of Mayors, his concerns with the civil service and recruitment and selection. And as Linda mentioned, it's not only law enforcement, it's all these other positions, municipal positions, and they all have to follow the rule of three. And sometimes you have to pick the best of the worst. It's an unfortunate situation and needs to be reformed. So I think there's movement aboard statewide to address the civil service issues. As I mentioned before, it's going to be a hard nut to crack, but I think there's a momentum moving on this thing. The Chiefs, the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police, that's their #1 priority legislative wise to get something changed. So there's a movement. And once NISAC passes their resolution, I'm going to bring it before our legislature, try to get another resolution passed similar to theirs, so we all speak with one voice.
Thank you. Thank you for following up. Other comments?
I'm sorry. I also just saw in the paper an article from the Rochester Police Department, I believe, and I would imagine that they're going through the similar process that we are. And one of the things that they said that they would take, one of the actions that they were taking was to include more, I guess I'll just say, citizens on the hiring process. And I'm going to guess that's just to provide a little more transparency into the hiring of their personnel in the police department. And we haven't had any discussion about that. I guess I don't know what the hiring process is in the Genesee County Sheriff Department. I guess, you know, twofold. What is that process like as far as the, I know that it's a civil service process, but what is the hiring process like? And do you think that there is a space or a call for or a need for a more diverse process for hiring people, just for transparency's sake?
Okay, well, first of all, you have the civil service test, and then when the results come out, we get a list of everybody on the that passed the test, and then we get into the rule of 3. The process then is those individuals are called into, well, let me back up. They're also required to pass a physical agility test, a psychological test, and a polygraph. So we'll have the interview process, and that's usually the undersheriff, the 2 chief deputies, and possibly a sergeant that sit and interview the applicants. And then we also, then in conjunction with that, we'll run the PT test. We're starting to move to being, before we do the interviews, to go to the PT test first, because if they don't pass the PT, then you're just wasting your time. As long as they pass the PT test, then they will take they'll have the interview, and then we will go with a background investigation on them in conjunction with the psychological and the polygraph. So you could have 3 candidates all going through, your top 3 all going through that process at once. From that point, once they're they pass everything, then we'll make a job offer, and then they'll be sent off to one of the training academies, either Niagara, Erie, or Monroe. Did I miss anything there, Brad?
No, Sheriff, you covered everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that
Other
process,
comments?
just so you know, Laura, that process takes minimally 2 months.
Right.
It could take up to a considerably longer time than that. Because you could literally, you know, you could have your background running, and then you're just about done with the background. Everything looks good, so you start scheduling for a polygraph and a psychological test, and then all of a sudden you get some bad news that there's something there.
Right.
Now you got to go back and start all over again.
Okay, thank you. I listed under number 7 a couple of issues which I felt we were lacking on, and one of them concerning data, because we really have very little data. I talked with the undersheriff about this on, I believe it was Friday, And earlier today, he texted me, which I find sort of interesting. Just, I believe the actual name of the report, if I'm reading this right, Brad, is Subject Management / Resistance Report, which in any case, in 2018, that report was filled out 13 times, in 19, 8 times, in 20, 9 times. Correct on that, Brad?
Yeah, no, you're correct.
And just explain again what generates the report.
We use this anytime that a use of force, a deputy has to use use of force against an individual. They document the date of the incident, the nature of the incident, the subject's name, address, whether they were male, female, their height, their weight, and then their subject behavior, whether they appeared normal prior to the incident, appeared abnormal, were they under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and then whether or not they were transported via medical or they refused transport. We also document whether or not they were injured, if they had any pre-existing injuries. Then we document the reason for the use of force. Was it necessary to effect the arrest? Was it necessary to defend the reporting officer, to prevent violent, forcible felony act? Was it necessary to defend another, or to restrain that individual for their own safety? And there's several different levels of subject resistance. It could be nonverbal intimidation, behavioral cues from the subject. It could be verbal threats, direct or indirect statements. It could be passive resistance, non-compliant with lawful commands. And it could be defensive resistance, physical actions that prevent the officer's control. They attempt to harm the officer. There's also active aggression. He's actively combative with another, or aggravated aggression. Those subjects' actions pose a threat to serious physical injury or death to another. So the deputy will document what verbal direction was given. If they had to use empty hand control, whether it was a physical escort technique, a hand strike, leg or foot strike, any type of intermediate weapons that were used, whether it was a chemical agent, pepper spray, impact instrument, or expandable batons, or was the taser deployed? And then there is a section for a deadly weapon. We also document the individual is, the taser is used. We document the number of cartridges that were fired, approximate distance between the individual. Was it a successful tase? Was the subject wearing heavy clothing? Were there additional deployments needed? Did the probes penetrate the subject's skin? And then any other type of injury is documented. We document the witnesses to the incident, whether or not the deputy was injured, and any other law enforcement officers or agencies that were present. And then the deputy will give a brief narrative on exactly what the circumstances that led up to that and the nature of the call.
And each time one of those is filled out, then it's approved by the sergeant or reviewed by the sergeant, then it goes right up to the chief deputy. And then what comes next is the body camera footage to review each subject resistance report.
So bottom line is, which we had talked about earlier in this position, is it's not even one a month. It's like one every month and a half or so over the last few years. And the range is obviously very great. I mean, anywhere from the incident out in Indian Falls there a couple of years ago to reasonably, I don't want to say minor, but it's, quite a range of activity. And so I appreciate Brad getting that data for me. One of the things that also came up in my discussions with private individuals was the whole use of body cameras. And correct me again on this, Brad, that anytime there's an interaction with the public, the body camera is supposed to go on. And by your policies, what we were talking about the other day.
Yes, that's correct.
So on a road stop, when the officer gets out of the car, the body camera is supposed to go on. Were you able to find any data? When
I was-
requested, are we able to get most of those? If there's an incident and then there's, prosecutions or whatever, are we finding that the body cameras are, the videos are available? The officers did do it.
Yeah, I would say the majority of the time, I wasn't able to get exact percentage, but anytime an arrest is made, body cameras, it's per our rules and regulations, the deputy should have that on or will have that on. The only time that, we would be able to know if they did or did not is if we were reviewing the body cam footage for an arrest or a complaint. We would then research that. But to give you an exact number on that, I wouldn't have that at this time.
So is there other data that any member of the committee would like to see or think it might be useful? Jerry, I see you got a comment.
Yes, because I wasn't sure if the use of force data that you were talking to Brad about included any use of force reports generated from jail incidents. And if it didn't, shouldn't it?
Brad, did you get that? Brad, did you hear that? Sheriff?
I don't believe it did include the jail incidents, and I think you're right, Jerry, you probably should.
Do they fill out the same form or is it a different form?
It's very similar, yes.
Okay. Could
We can get that for you.
get something like that. Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions or other pieces of data that might be helpful or just getting a different perspective on? Is there any other key points or anything that we should be researching further? Because the next step in the process was over the next 2 weeks. We'll be writing a draft report, which hopefully will be out to you prior to the meeting, and which is scheduled for February 5th, which is a Monday. Is that right?
I think that's a Friday.
Yeah, that's the wrong date, right? It's February 1st, isn't it, Matt?
February 1st.
February 1st, it should be, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
February 1st. You are correct.
Okay. Just so unusual to see you make a mistake.
I want to blame it on somebody else.
Okay, good. Good senior management. Good senior management. That's fine. So anyways, February 1st, same time, 6 o'clock, Monday the 1st. We will have, hopefully prior to that, a draft report out, which will be discussed that evening. And then we will rework that. And on the following meeting, which would be February 15th, hopefully we can get it approved, at which time our work is done and we forward it to the county legislature, going first to, I don't know, it's going to be a committee of the whole or Ways and Means or Public Service, somebody over there. It'd be sent to, right, Matt? I mean, you know which committee it would be going to first?
Oh, it should go to public service.
First.
I would assume. Now, one thing we built in enough time that if there was ever an extra meeting, so this is due by April 1st, and we have it so that the full county legislature will consider suggestions at the March 10th legislature meeting. So theoretically, we could hold that off if, for example, because right now the timeline has it so that on the 1st, we come back and look at a more formal draft. And then the 15th, we would vote on it. But if we wanted to open up for more feedback, more comments, if there was anything that's basically, I just want to make sure there is time to add another meeting in there and push it back if the group felt that it was necessary. If we feel like the information captured is accurately reflected of the work that we did, then there's no need. Just when we were planning this out, I like to build in some contingencies if something happens.
Gary's on. I don't know is that schedule works for you, Gary? I mean, you're the legislator. On
Yeah,
public
it works
services.
for me, it works for us, but, the chairman is on, I see. I don't know if she's planning on having a committee of the whole to go over this report, or if you're gonna go to public service first.
Shelley, are you on tonight?
I am. I was just about having to leave, but I would think that a committee of the whole after the public service, Gary, would work best because I think having everyone together on this would be ideal. And especially if we could have the panelists with us at the same time to help indicate their specific interests and the topics and ideas that they bring forward. I think it's really important that we have a full communication.
I agree with that. This is an important document, and I think all legislators should have input on this.
Okay, fine. We will make sure that happens. What's public services date next month? In March.
In March, it's March actually 15th. So that would give us more time because that would have us go through the second legislative meeting of the month of March. So public service is the 15th. So you could have that night and then have a committee of the whole right after that with the full group. We could schedule this extra meeting. And then it goes to Ways and Means on the 17th and then full adoption of the legislature on the 24th. And this still gives us a full week to deliver the resolution to the state.
So we'll kind of figure that's the schedule. And you might ask Pam just to send that out, but the dates you just talked about there that we'll be targeting and drop dead. Other issues, comments, questions? Again, I'd love to hear for anybody, they can call me anytime they want. We can discuss their various perspectives. I find it very, very useful. It's been very enlightening to me. If there's nothing further, we will be talking on the 1st of February, 2 weeks from last night. Again, thank you, everybody. And if you've noticed in the background, there's been a bunch of kids running around. My grandchildren are here this evening, and you can close the door all you want, but there's still kids running up and down the room outside here. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending this evening.
Thank you. Go Bills.
Go, oh, yes.
Go Bills.
Yeah.
Man,
Okay.
didn't jinx it.
Okay, good night now.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.